and welcome to Love Your Library, Hampshire Libraries podcast. I'm Hattie Dulac, here with my co-host Craig Saunders. Hi, Craig.
Hi, Hattie. Good to see you again. Have you been reading anything interesting recently?
Well, I'm sort of in between books at the moment, so I'm currently waiting for Richard Osman's third book in the Thursday Murder Club series to become available on BorrowBox so that I can give it a bit of a listen. I like that series and I like listening to it on the audiobook version. It's a hugely anticipated book this year, and from what I've been seeing all over social media this week, he's also signed a contract to do 3 more in the series, so we've got plenty to look forward to there. But from what I hear, this one will be well worth the wait. And how about you?
I am just going to be starting a new book, actually. So this one is called Eve of Man. It's the first book in a trilogy by Giovanna and Tom Fletcher. So really interesting writing process for this book, actually. Giovanna and Tom are husband and wife, and they storyboarded the book and then wrote individual chapters separately and then pulled them together. So I'm really interested to see what it's going to be like. It's a fairly old book now. It actually was released in 2018 and it's been sat on my bookshelf since around about then, because I got it soon after it was released. So it'll be interesting to see what it's like. But effectively, it is a story about the first girl that's born in 50 years. They call her Eve, and there are suitors that are lined up for her because effectively humanity is resting on her to produce the first offspring in a long time. And then she falls in love or has a relationship with someone that's not one of those. So it's called Eve of Man. As I say, it's the first in a trilogy. So it will be really interesting to see what it's like. The second book was released, I think, a couple of years later, and the third one will be coming out soon. So I think if I start this one now, I should have done both of the Eve of Man books by the time the third one comes out. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I'll let you know how I get on.
Oh yeah, definitely. Sounds like it's something that would be so popular with our listeners as well, especially with such a well-known pair of authors.
Thanks to our supporter BorrowBox, the free library app that allows you to download ebooks and audiobooks straight to your phone or tablet.
All you'll need to use it is your library membership number and PIN.
So, moving on to our guest for this episode, Sarah Mears, who's a programme manager for Libraries Connected, one of the key organisations we work with in Hampshire.
So Libraries Connected is an organisation that really believes in the power of reading to transform lives. They pioneer projects that encourage reading and promote the value of libraries to communities across the country.
We spoke to Sarah about her role and all the wonderful library projects she's been a part of, including Empathy Day, an annual event which encourages children to read books that build empathy skills.
And she was a brilliant guest to speak to, gave us a real insight into the excellent work both Libraries Connected and Empathy Lab do to support reading in communities all across the country and especially within Hampshire.
You can find all the links to the programmes and resources we mention during the interview in our show notes.
But without further ado, here's us talking to Sarah from Libraries Connected.
So, before we play this interview, unfortunately we did have some issues with the recording and the sound quality isn't the greatest. However, we didn't want you to miss out on what was a fantastic interview with Empathy Lab, but sorry for the poor audio quality in parts of this podcast.
Today we're joined by Sarah from Libraries Connected. Would you be able to give us a bit of a background on what the project is and what your involvement is in it?
So I'm Sarah Mears, I'm the Programme Manager for Libraries Connected. Libraries Connected was founded in 2018, so it's 4 years old this year. And we were, before that, the Society of Chief Librarians, which is a membership organisation for heads of library service. We were lucky enough to get Arts Council England funding in 2018, so we became what's known as a sector support organisation, supporting public library services in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and the Crown dependencies. Our remit's sort of wider. It's still a membership organisation for heads of library service, but it's wider than that. So it's much more about supporting all public library staff through big projects, through advocacy, through workforce development and so on. So it's been a roller coaster ride for 4 years, where 2 years of them have more or less been in lockdown as well. So it's been really eye-opening.
Excellent. And you're the programme manager, so can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
I lead on the big kind of universal offer programs. So back before even 2018, we'd established a universal library offer framework as a way of articulating what libraries are all about. And that's reading, health and wellbeing, culture and creativity, and sort of information and digital and learning sort of permeating through that. So we actually have an offer lead for each of those universal offers who's from the library sector. And I work with them and work with their teams to coordinate activity at a national level in each of those 4 areas. So things like the Reading Well books on prescription collections that lots and lots of libraries have from the reading offer and the health and wellbeing offer. We've just been working really hard on the big Jubilee Read through the reading offer. And that's kind of coming through the culture and creativity offer. So lots of activities through those universal offers. But I also lead on big projects. So we're just at the end of a big leadership programme for public libraries. And also we had a big bid for the novels that shaped our world, which we always laugh about because it was supposed to be a year-long project in 2019. And we've just finished it in 2022. But we all know the reasons for that. So big projects in the universal offer framework is mostly what I do, but also quite a lot of workforce development.
Yeah, hopefully our listeners will be fairly familiar with quite a few of those because we do mention them quite a lot in the podcast, in our newsletters and things like that. Brilliant. So definitely making its way down here to Hampshire as well. So with it starting in 2018, what were the kind of foundations of the project? How did it really get started? Was there a massive gap that needed to be filled in terms of coordinating things like this?
Yeah, I think there was really, because although we have CILIP, which is our professional membership organisation, there wasn't something that was just for public libraries, apart from the Society of Chief Librarians. And we were getting lots and lots of projects through Arts Council England. And it just seemed that when you had the opportunity to become a more formal organisation, we'd actually now become a charity that would actually really be there to stand up for public libraries and support public libraries. It seemed the perfect thing to do. It meant for the first time it had paid staff rather than people doing it out of their day job. And we're a very small team, but although we're actually based in Islington at the moment, we are a national team. So we do lots of travel, sometimes lots of travel on Zoom at the moment, but it's brilliant because you get to know all sorts of different library services, from little library services in the far north of Yorkshire to Hampshire libraries and everywhere in between. So it's great, and just understand the differences and the different needs of different services and their communities.
I mean, we see a lot of it, you know, we've got a massive county down here and we see actually individual branches of our libraries have very different needs and requirements and stuff. Yeah. Is that something that you tackle at a national level as well? You know, there must be very different requirements for remote library services to more metropolitan areas.
Yeah, absolutely we do. And we see that because it's really important as well that we recognise that. So our projects, although we do national projects, what we always do with them is shape them in a very flexible way so that they can be delivered locally in a way that suits that local community. And I think that's really important because libraries are at the heart of their community, so they've got to respond to the needs of that community and reflect that community, as well as opening communities' eyes as well to wider possibilities. I think that's a really important role for libraries too.
Definitely, yeah. And I mean, you touched upon it there, but 2018, pre-COVID. So can you tell me a little bit about how the pandemic has kind of changed things for you in terms of how you're working and some of the projects you've been working on? I guess it's meant that things have shifted a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, we were a very young organisation, still finding our feet when the pandemic hit, really. I don't think we realised how much we were until it hit. And then we really had to rethink what we were doing. We wanted to keep in contact with all the libraries. You know, we wanted to support them. So we were doing a lot more work in terms of engaging with government, particularly. And one of our big roles during the pandemic was to keep libraries up to date with the current guidance, which I believe you changed almost every hour, I think, sometimes. So just keeping very much in touch with our colleagues in the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, making sure that we were feeding questions back to them and then, you know, feeding the questions back to libraries was a really important role that we undertook. And I think it really strengthened our relationship, both with libraries, but also with the government, that department particularly, and the civil servants in that department. But we also developed something called Libraries from Home, because we realised how quickly libraries had adapted their services to make sure that they were online and make sure things like rhyme times could still carry on in an online field. So we were supporting that by making sure we had lots of training tools. So actually library staff training each other to deliver online activities and to make podcasts, to run webinars, to make film, all those kinds of things we were doing, escape rooms online. And so we hosted lots of training webinars and had lots of resources on our Libraries from Home page, which was really, really popular. popular and visited an awful lot. So I think we learned quickly about digital activity in the digital world, but also we were supporting libraries who were doing amazing things with their communities, organising their click and collect services, but also all the emergency response that library staff switched their hands to. And I have to say we were really proud of library staff, the way they were able to switch over to do that kind of really direct customer service in a way that probably no one else could, because libraries are so good at doing that kind of customer service support every day.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? It was a kind of overnight switch. Not to brag, but we have actually won an award for our response to the pandemic by trying to engage those kind of digital customers.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think it's something that everyone in the service has contributed to and is incredibly proud of, and rightly so, because it was a really amazing response. You had people who were so used to on the ground being face to face with customers all the time and really providing such necessary services in person, suddenly running rhyme time from their living rooms, performing like book readings and story times and book groups and all of these things via a screen. It's a totally different environment. I think they all adapted so well.
They did. One of the things that we were able to do and support them, because it's all those kind of hidden things, was make sure that publishers are given their permissions to read them online, because normally publishers don't, because libraries are delivering them in person, and that's fine. But that kind of backroom stuff that you don't think about, in the importance of making sure that you've got clearance to deliver those kind of rhyme times and story times online, is really important.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced throughout the pandemic when, libraries physically were shut?
I think it was making sure that we were keeping in touch with everybody, just being there for people, really, because I think there were times when it was really tough for libraries out there, especially when they were, like lots of staff maybe were either furloughed or redeployed, and they were trying to keep their essential services going. So it was just making sure we had that kind of support. But also, I suppose the big challenge was making sure that we were keeping our information as current and as up to date as we could, so that we were giving accurate information back to libraries.
Yeah, it's hard to be in that central position giving out information, but a very important job and one very well done, I think.
It's that unknown, because nobody really knew, did they, at the beginning, like, do books carry the virus? That was a big thing at the beginning, like, can the virus exist on books, and are they safe? And all of those things that we were able to clarify and clear up was really important. And we worked out, how long you could quarantine a book for and so on. So, yeah, interesting learning that we didn't think we'd ever need.
Feels like a totally different world thinking about it now, 2 years down the line, when I remember people sort of spraying Dettol all over their shopping and stuff like that, because you just, you didn't know. So.
Indeed, yeah.
In a kind of way, I think our library teams particularly consider themselves sort of custodians of information. It's quite a nice representation to have that disseminated from a central organisation as well, actually. So it's symbolically quite cool.
And you've touched upon it there in terms of the importance that libraries have in the community. They're really central points, not just for resources for books, but also from a social aspect, from a mental health aspect, being able to go out, see people, spend some time, especially in that period where we were all locked away. You want to just talk to us a little bit about that? Because I'm sure that you come across it on a weekly, daily basis in the work that you do.
Just as we were able to kind of open up our spaces again, we did several things that were around trying to get people back into libraries. Because I think one of the things that happened was people just lost confidence about being in public spaces for understandable reasons. And we wanted to make sure that people saw their libraries as safe places and places where they could just go and have, fun and relax and connect with people again in their communities. So things like the novels, I talked about the novels project, which was going on, and it started in the physical realm in February 2020 and then went online. But as soon as we were able to run events in libraries again, so we had authors and activities around novels in libraries, now we're getting the evaluations through that. People were just saying how important it was to connect and just go into a library. It was very local. They felt safe in a library because they could move around. They didn't have to be really, really close to anybody else, but they could engage in a cultural activity in their local community. They didn't have to travel on public transport or anywhere else to get to something that was about having some culture. And I think for a lot of us who probably had spent 2 years without having any proper culture, in our lives, it's wonderful to re-experience performance and poetry and all of those things. And I think libraries are so important for that, really, to just get people back and experiencing culture.
Absolutely. And from a personal level, I suppose, getting to know you a bit more, if you're engaging with those kinds of services culturally, or particularly with reading, what kind of things do you like to read, and how has that maybe led you to where you are in your career now?
I've always been a huge reader. As a child, I was one of those children who always had their nose in a book, mainly horse books, I must admit, when I was little. I was a very horsey little girl. And I suppose what I wanted to do was make sure that other children were like inspired as I was by reading. I think that was the thing that drove me. So I was a children's librarian to start off with. And most of my career, to be honest, I've been a children's librarian. And I still consider myself a children's librarian, even though I'm working with adults as well now. So always got children's books in my bag. Part of my work outside of libraries with Empathy Lab, and at the moment I'm reading lots and lots of children's books with a particular empathy focus, so that we're putting together a Read for Empathy collection for 2023. So we're busy reading for that. But I've just read a wonderful book called Still Life by Sarah Winman. I don't know if you know that, but I'd recommend that to anyone who wants just a really good read. And it's half set in Italy, so it's got those kind of summer vibes as well. Brilliant characterization. But I'm really discovering nature writing at the moment, really enjoying all sorts of nature writing. And I think partly that's because we've just launched with our partners in CILIP the Green Manifesto for libraries. And so I've been doing lots of thinking about that recently as well. So looking at environment as important.
You just mentioned Empathy Lab that you're involved.
Yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, Empathy Lab actually is very much based in your neck of the woods, because it was founded by Miranda McKerney, who used to be at the Reading Agency and who lives in Winchester. So a lot of our planning is done in Winchester for Empathy Lab, but it's a national organisation really predicated on the fact that reading builds empathy. And lots of organisations look at the importance of reading for well-being, and obviously reading for social mobility and reading for enjoyment. But reading for empathy was an area that probably wasn't so much covered. And so we just got together, 4 of us back in 2015, thought, well, let's just see if there's anything in this kind of reading for social and emotional skills, but particularly empathy. Found some academics along the way, particularly Professor Robin Banerjee at the University of Sussex, who's also done the Kindness Project. So your listeners may remember the BBC Radio 4's Kindness Project. He's been working on that. He's also a supporter of ours. And it's basically aimed at children, and we work with schools, with libraries, and we have an annual Empathy Day, which this year was on the 9th of June, where we really highlight the power of books to build empathy. And when you start to delve into the science of that, it's absolutely fascinating, because how the brain responds when we read, it's almost as if we're meeting people in real life when we're meeting the characters. So Empathy Lab's predicated on the fact that books build empathy. So the amazing thing that happens when children read is that our brains think the characters we're reading about are almost like real people. So with the way we empathise with the characters is the way of really building our empathy skills, meaning we can empathise with people in real life. So that it's a really important role for books to just help children develop those feelings of empathy that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives.
When you put it like that, it seems so obvious, almost like you say, it's when you're reading a book as a child. I remember it, you're kind of being introduced to characters, and it forces you to put yourself in someone else's shoes, which is the whole thing with empathy.
Absolutely.
So I know that there are loads of reading lists and there are loads of events and things that happen around Empathy Day. How do you select a book that's particularly empathy driven?
It's very personal, I think. I think every reader will find a book that speaks to them. But we do have some empathy criteria, which are around, the strength of the character, perhaps the situations they find themselves in, the authenticity of the writing. And every year now, for the last, I think this is about the 6th year, we publish a Read for Empathy book collection, usually in January or February every year. And at this time of the year, we put a call out to publishers to submit their most empathy-boosting books for us to read. And we have a team of 12 judges, if you like, so librarians, teachers, people from the children's book world. And we're all feverishly reading at the moment, because we've got about 160 books that have been submitted. So between us, we're reading through them to get to a long list by the summer. And then we'll actually produce our final list back, as I say, in February next year. And we have a range of books from very early years, picture books. It's really important that children's empathy is built young, through to books for teenagers. And we publish 2 lists, one for early years and primary and one for secondary.
And so Empathy Day next year, what date is that?
It will be on the 8th of June. That's usually on a Thursday of that second week of June, just after half term. So we're really working hard on that already, planning the themes and who's going to be speaking. We have lots of engagement through authors on the day. So we usually stream events on the day itself, but also have lots of run-up events that are about engaging with schools and with public libraries. Public libraries are really, really key to Empathy Day, making sure that the whole community knows it's Empathy Day, not just children in school. And that's really important to us.
So obviously our listeners will be looking out for the book list that gets released in February after that long months of reading. And for you guys, how else can any of our listeners get involved apart from attending events? And is there anything else that they can do?
Yeah, I would say follow Empathy Lab on Twitter. If you just go to @EmpathyLabUK on Twitter, or check out our website, which is www.empathylab.uk. You can subscribe to the newsletter so you can find out what's going on. We are looking at having events throughout the year, not just in the run up to Empathy Day. So just keep an eye on what's going on the website. But there's also on the website loads and loads of stuff left from this year's Empathy Day. So we keep the films up. So one of the things that we've done for the last couple of years are empathy walks, where we actually encourage people to walk around their local community, but rather than just looking at the local landmark, they're looking at it through sort of empathy eyes. So thinking about, what are the situations that I'm seeing in the community? How do they touch my emotions? Can I do something about them? Is there something that I can actually make a difference into my community by what I've seen on my walk? And we've got lots and lots of authors to do that. So there's loads of empathy walks, wonderful empathy walks by children's authors on our website. And the other thing on the website are empathy shorts. So we've commissioned 500-word short stories by all sorts of wonderful children's authors that are in empathy themes. And so especially if you've got, perhaps older kids who don't really enjoy reading that much, an empathy short is a brilliant way to engage them with reading because it's very quick and easy, but really gives them a powerful empathy punch.
Sounds amazing. Sounds so good. So yeah, we'll keep a list of all those kinds of resources in our show notes for the episode so listeners can go and browse it at their desire.
And I wanted to ask you a question because I think we did you a bit of an injustice in our introduction because you're actually Sarah Mears MBE, aren't you? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I was chair of the Association of Senior Children's and Education Librarians for about 3 years back in 2015, 2016, 2017. And I think that's what I got the MBE for, which I was very honoured to receive. So I got it for services to children and young people, which I was absolutely thrilled about because I said at the beginning I've been a children's librarian really from the start of my career. And so it really meant something that I was honoured to work with children and young people. So yeah, it was an amazing honour and it was a lovely day. It was really nice because I got my award at Christmas in 2018. So I went to Buckingham Palace that just before Christmas. It was about the 18th of December. So wonderful Christmas tree in Buckingham Palace. It was a very, very lovely day.
Oh, you must have been so pleased.
Yeah. And a lot of fun as well, actually. Yeah. I was surprised at how much fun it was. I was very nervous, but people were very welcoming and they put you at your ease, I think.
So in terms of looking forward, obviously we've got Empathy Day coming up next year, but for any kind of future projects for both Libraries Connected and Empathy Lab, could you give us an indication of anything to look out for?
Yeah, so I think with the Empathy Lab, we're hoping to have at least some webinars in the autumn, and we're doing lots of training in the autumn as well. So modular training, so 2-hour sessions. So if anybody who works with children and young people or even parents are interested in coming along to that training, then do look on the Empathy Lab website for that. And obviously we'll be preparing to launch the book list and definitely preparing for next year's Empathy Day. And in terms of Libraries Connected, well, we're actually in an interesting position at the moment because we're in the middle of bidding for our next round of funding. So we've just submitted our bid for that. So we'll be looking forward and keeping our fingers crossed that we get our next lot of funding. But we're also working on a range of projects, particularly around equality and diversity and in terms of library book collections at the moment and making sure they're as diverse and as representative of our communities as we can get them to be. So that's one of the projects that we're working on. We've just launched the Green Libraries Manifesto. So we'll be doing lots of work around that. And I know that Hampshire are leading the way because your head of service is actually chairing that group. So that's really good. And we're looking forward to doing a lot more work on the Green Libraries Manifesto. So yeah, and so other projects, we're looking at work with family hubs, so more work with the new family hubs that are coming on stream, and particularly around early years, and promoting the importance of libraries to very young children and their families. So that work's just kicking off as well.
That was really enjoyable. Thank you so much for taking the time speaking to us.
Thank you. Thanks very much.